Welcome, everyone, to Deep Drinks Podcast. This is a very exciting episode. Nuriyah is an ex-Muslim human rights activist and content creator who's had many popular debates with Muslim apologists on the right for things like on the right for women to unveil, Quranic values, and more. You may know her as Holy Humanist, and today we welcome her for the second time on Deep Drinks. Welcome, Nuriyah Khan. Hey, welcome, Nuriyah.
Hi, David. Thank you. You have such a sick intro, by the way.
Thank you. I think I used some template and I tweaked it a little bit, but mainly it was the templates work. Thank you. Cool. All right. So, well, thank you. We're running a little bit late today, and I apologize to everyone. That's mainly my fault.
Mainly, it's mine as well. So
it's 7 a.m. for me. I overslept my alarm, but that's good. That's fine, because what have we got to drink today, Nuriyah?
We have got some Baileys in the house today.
Yep, and I'm adding mine to some coffee. So
yes, that's why I thought it'd be the perfect drink for me to have as dessert and a nightcap, and you to have with a shot of coffee.
Yeah. So what time is it for you over in London town? Are you in London?
Yes. It's just on 10 o'clock in the evening. So yeah, cheers from London.
Cool. Cheers. Well, I haven't poured mine in yet, but I'm going to do that now.
Okay. Well, I made something special for you, David. I don't usually do this, but I added a ton of ice, and then I actually crushed Ferrero Rocher into this.
Oh, that sounds so good.
Yeah, it looks incredible.
Sounds so good. Awesome. Well, thanks for everyone for coming out. If those who don't know this channel, I have deep conversations over deep drinks. The guest chooses the drink, and then that sets the tone for the interview. I've had people choose tea, and I've had people choose vodka, and I'll do whatever the guest wants to drink. So I'm so stoked with this. So Nuriyah, you haven't been on the show for a while. So you were on the 22nd episode of Deep Drinks, and now it is number 83.
David, you've been busy.
I know, I have been. So how have you been over the last I don't know, a year or whatever, 10 months or how I think it's been. What have you been up to? How's your channel been going?
Yeah, it's going well, actually. Thank you. It's been a hot minute since you and I have done a collaboration on a podcast. Actually, we always leave it too late, but yeah, that's life, gets in the way. It's going strong and steady, to be honest. I am trying to make it really kind of either I get somebody on who's wants to share their story and use my platform to do so, especially when it comes to women. So I've got an ex-hijabi French Moroccan woman coming to tell her story tomorrow. She's got an incredible story. And again, she just reached out saying, I saw your interview with the Apostate Prophet, and it gave me the courage to, I feel like I can say mine. So that's exact demographic of what my channel is aiming to do. But yeah, it's been a bit quiet lately because I've, work and life, but I've got a couple of things in the pipeline. So yeah, and there's always stuff going on in the community page. So yeah, do keep an eye out. But oh yeah, that's it. Thank you, David.
That's so I saw this and I was like, this looks really, really cool. So I'm looking forward to this one. So when is that? It's in a couple of days, is it? Or tomorrow?
In about 23 hours from now. So yeah.
Awesome. Okay, well, it's 6 a.m. for me. I'll have to see if I can get up. If not, I'll watch it. I'll definitely be watching it. But yeah, you've got so much good content on your channel, so much cool stuff. Critical Faculty's been on. You're just pumping out really awesome stuff. Hanny's been on, which is cool.
Yeah,
cool.
We tend to do a lot more deep dives. But David, also right back at you. I've been watching some of your recent streams, and just because your topics you choose pique my interest anyway. It's so my cup of tea. But I've just been falling asleep listening to your podcast, and I'm like, wow, it just honestly, I go ahead.
That's great. I'm really stoked. Yeah, I'm really stoked about that. Thank you.
Yeah,
But
no,
sometimes, like, sometimes I'm trying, like, I'm like, do people actually like this show? Like, sometimes I like question it. So yeah, it's nice to hear that. So thank
yeah,
you.
no, honestly, I just before we go, because normally, you get such an information overload. So I always hear about like, oh, let's talk about the Mesopotamian origins of the Bible, or how
Mm.
mythology affected the Bible, or whatever. And so all of that information gets just like lost in your mind. But the way that you kind of interview your guests, I really like that style. Like a lot of the information and nuggets of like knowledge was stuck in my mind, like especially when it came down to like Assyrian, Akkadian, the old manuscripts. That was really helpful from your channel. So my hat's off to you.
I think that is like, not to toot my own horn, but I think like that's a little bit my gift. Like, I think I'm a little slow, and so I think that what it is like I'm trying to understand on like a 12-year-old level. So then like I ask. So I think like it's worked. Like my slowness is like actually helps the channel a little bit. So yeah,
Oh,
thank
100%. Yeah, channel that.
you. Sweet. So I've got a clip that I would like to show. To kind of start off this whole conversation. So we want to talk about there is the we're currently on like an anti-apologetics arc on this channel. So I came to the realization that apologetics of any form was like inherently dishonest. I don't care what it is. I just think it's dishonest. It comes from a place of it's like a car salesman. They're always going to tell you to buy a car. They're never going to tell you like, oh, maybe you don't need a car. They're there to sell you a car. That's what an apologist's job is to do. And I wanted to really get that message across. But obviously with my background, I focus mainly on Christianity, and it's regardless of whether or not something is true or valid. The apologetics of Christianity is just incredibly dishonest. And I was like, I wonder if Islamic apologetics is dishonest as well. And of course, yes, it was. Well, from my investigations anyway. So I have a clip that I want to show, and then we can use that to dive into some of the ethical problems that we find in Islam. Now, strictly, I guess you could say that if God is the author of, if Allah is the author of these laws, then and what He says goes, then they're not immoral. Like, I guess you could just say, like, oh well, that's the way it is. This doesn't disprove anything. But I guess what I'm trying to do is I guess show things for what they are and just see if that sits well with everybody. So this is what I tend to do with the Bible as well. Hey, the Bible condones slavery. Hey, the Bible condones sex slavery. Does that sit well with you? And what a lot of people will do is they'll say, no, like it doesn't sit well with me, and then they'll try and argue, no, it doesn't contain sex slavery, it doesn't contain slavery, and that's where you can just easily demonstrate that they do, that it does. So I thought we can play this beautiful clip from friend of the show, legend. He's not actually. He's but Daniel. Do you know his? I don't know how to say his last name. I don't want to be rude.
Hakikachu.
Yes, that's it.
Mhm.
So this is just to kick off our conversation. This is a conversation where he's debating inspiring philosophy on the merits of child marriage. Is it acceptable? So we're starting off quite spicy. And I just want to play this little section because inspiring philosophy is arguing the point that so the Quran says, correct me if I'm wrong, Nuriyah, but it says that when a lady, a girl has reached maturity, as in like she's gotten her period or gone through some sort of puberty, then she's right to have sex in marriage. Is that right?
Well, the Quran doesn't put any kind of condition on it. That's why we've got the whole open-endedness with the child marriage, because it gives a waiting period for children who have not menstruated, and then women or girls who have menstruated.
Okay.
So it leaves it
So
open.
yeah, so well, what Daniel is positing here is that any age someone can get married, but the sex is meant to be after. Maybe he's using some hadith or something, but it's meant to be after they reach puberty. But the problem is you have things like precocious puberty, where children can have go through puberty at ridiculously young ages, 3 years old, 2 years old, like even younger. So this is him kind of biting the bullet on that, and I just want to show you this clip, so kind of set the tone.
Sex before we start maximizing fertility, right?
When the body is physically mature, according to Islamic law.
Do you know what precocious puberty is?
Yes, I do.
Okay, what is it?
It means starting puberty unusually early, like
beyond
averages.
Is there anything in Islam that prevents you from a man marrying a 5-year-old that started precocious puberty?
No, marriage can happen. You can arrange a marriage even as an infant, but that doesn't mean that sex is allowed.
Okay, could a man have a marriage to a 5-year-old consummated if she started precocious puberty?
If she starts showing signs of physical maturity, then yes, that's permissible. As I stated, that's
what about
the
age 4?
If there are signs
3.
So this is something that becomes biologically impossible because precocious puberty.
I have a study that shows it goes as early as 11 months.
All right. Well, that's something that the parents would not. See, the thing about Islamic marriage is that parents are involved at these ages. And when you look at the marriage of the Prophet, peace be upon him, to Aisha, her parents were involved. And so she was not living with the Prophet, peace be upon him, even though she was married to him. So the parents have oversight. And sometimes a qadi or a judge can have oversight if the guardians are not capable to make sure that the rights and the physical well-being of a child or a minor are not harmed by that marriage.
What about, because you've tried to justify sexual slavery after a war. So what if a man finds a 7-year-old, let's say, started her period? Could he take her back as a sex slave?
So that's a whole different debate on slavery and concubinage.
I'm just talking about the minor aspect. Would that be fine?
Yeah, so if a girl is any age, she can be taken as
a sex slave, right?
Yeah, as opposed to being left to die after war.
So women can't take care of themselves. They would need to be taken by the men because they're too capable of caring for themselves.
Only about 10 seconds left.
Yeah, a 4-year-old, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old.
Not talking about the women and the children.
So I just want to stop it there for a sec, but I do want to continue it. I think that Daniel is being consistent with the Islamic values, and that's why we're talking about that today. What are your thoughts so far, Nuriyah?
Yeah, 100%. As far as Daniel goes, the one thing he does with his apologetics is that he stays very true to like mainstream Islam, and he won't try and mess around with it or try and make it more palatable to our modern values today. So like the example he gave was literally the Sunnah. So it's like following the tradition of what Prophet Muhammad did, and that's the most exemplar marriage that they have to follow is that of Aisha's, where the marriage was contracted before she had reached puberty, and then there's all these hadiths that she was literally playing with dolls and she'd be playing with other little girls in the house, even when she was married to the Prophet, and he would come in and, you know, she would say that my girl, like her friends, they would run away, and the Prophet would say, no, it's okay, you can stay here and play. And then there's hadiths which get a bit darker and talk about how you interact with like a child bride of yours before she's reached menstruation, so she's not physically able to tolerate intercourse. So there's like weird concepts in Islam, like of thighing and other things that the Prophet used to do, including things that, descriptions of how he treated her when she did eventually reach like her puberty and she did start menstruating. Then it discusses like how he would fondle her during those times as well. But there's a full-on, like in the literature, we have enough scope to know that the marriage was contracted by her father, and like she was given to Muhammad essentially, but it was known that she would go to his house when she reached the stage of puberty. But you see that happening in Afghanistan as well, like the men and fathers sell their daughters or contract their daughters into a marriage before they even, like honestly, when they're newborns, David. So they have no idea, and by the time they turn 6 or 7, they're kind of getting ready to go to that husband, quote unquote, house. And then you have no idea in those situations if those men are even following the Sunnah or they even care about it, because they are buying 5-year-olds. They're buying, girls who traditionally would not have reached puberty if they're developing normally. But yeah, Daniel Kikuchu is completely on point with the Islamic Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad's marriage to Aisha.
Mm. Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's obviously deplorable. It's obviously disgusting in so many different ways. But one thing I want to and I mentioned this to you in the previous stream, is one thing I wanted to mention to everyone is Muslims, and in this case specifically Muslim girls, Muslim women are affected by Islamic ideology more than anyone else. This is not an attack against the people, or Muslims in general, especially even ones that grow up with these poor ideologies and have these worldviews. This is more a critique of Islam, the ideology of Islam in general, which I think is incompatible with 21st century or 21st our values in the 21st century. Like, I think it's just absolutely it doesn't work. It can't work. It gets things wrong about science. It gets things wrong about what we know about the well-being of other people. And yeah, so let's continue, because he makes a really good point.
Yeah, this is the topic of sex slavery, which is also endorsed in the Old Testament and practiced by Moses and other prophets like Joshua. So that is a practice found within the Bible. It's found within Islam, within the Quran, and it's practiced, again, universally.
And I'll give you a chance to wrap up that sentence, and then we got to go to the next portion.
Yeah, so if you want to condemn Islam for these kinds of practices, you have to condemn Christianity and your entire religious tradition for exactly the same practices, if not worse. So I don't see the logic of this.
We'll jump.
So, well done, Daniel. I'd agree, mate. I would agree.
Yeah.
And that's why I do reject those things. It's interesting because a lot of the ways that Daniel, did you watch this whole debate?
No.
So the way that Daniel would argue things is he'd say, well, Christianity has the same problems. Like, Christianity has the same issues. And it's like, yeah, like, and I'm sitting here going, like, you're both wrong. Like, you've both got this like barbaric worldviews that are like outdated. And so, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting, David, because obviously when there's, like two theists debating, the kind of MO is to like turn against the other person's religion, or like, make them look inwards, and it's just kind of like, oh, it's Lord of the Rings versus Harry Potter at that point. So it's like, okay, just because it's like it's readily there, apparent in your ideology, therefore you can't condemn mine, right? So it's just like, okay, you've got the same dirt, so what happens there? That's why it's a lot more productive when you do kind of get into these situations with theists and you don't have any dog in the fight per se, because it's so much easier for us to call out both, like you just said straight away, like, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But you, this is one of the tactics of Muslim apologetics, is just to really turn hard on Christianity, Judaism, whatever they have to throw under the bus. Even if that means throwing Islam under the bus, saying that we're also wrong in practicing sex slavery because you guys also do it, but then we're all wrong together.
Yeah, it's like an admission of guilt. It's like, yeah, well, the Bible has it as well. And it's like, yeah, well, okay, like that's not the flex you think it is, bruh. Like it's so I actually thought we could do some, we could do some reading of the Bible and the Quran, which is so fun. But I actually have the same Quran as was pictured in the hands of one Andrew Tate when he was in prison. So this is actually the same Quran that I chose to get. It's actually a really beautiful Quran. But it's so funny when I saw him holding it, I was like, no way, I got the same Quran.
Is that the one that Hani has as well? I think there was one Hani recommended. It looked like that.
It's by that author.
Oh, okay, Abdul Halim. Right.
So it's got the Arabic right next to the. Yeah, it is really beautiful, and I have to admit there are parts of the Quran that I found very beautiful. I just don't think it makes up for all the horrid stuff in there. If you look at it, if you look at it for like what it is, like literature from that area at the time, cool, like that's where they're at. That's like the story. It's a bit of history, like but if you look at it as like divine inspired words of God, that's when you start to get into some trouble. But Oh,
Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead. No, I was just
Go
going to say, I used to honestly think the exact same thing about the Quran as well. Like, it's still, when I hear it, or when I still have my favorite kind of like recitation that I do find really soulful. I haven't listened to it since I left Islam, but like, even when I'd hear the call to prayer still, you know, it had that nice charm to it at some point. But it was only until I think I watched one of Abdullah Samir's videos, and that obviously in pagan Arabia before Islam, so pre-Islamic Arabia, there was this entire concept. Obviously, it was an oral tradition, so poetry was like really kind of just like the art of the, you know, of the era there, let's say. So everybody was kind of reciting these couplets, and various Arab tribes would have their own couplets about going to war, about love, about death, about all of these things. So when Prophet Muhammad first came up with like, or kind of started reciting these Quran verses, and the people heard them, it's in the Quran that, you know, the disbelievers or the people that were doubting his prophethood were saying, these are just poems that we've heard before Muhammad. Like, you're just repeating things that we've heard previously. And that just goes to show how much that style was picked up. Yeah.
Whoa, that's blowing me away, because I thought the biggest arrow in the Islamic quiver was the fact that they're like, if you listen, if you know it in Arabic, it's impossible to deny that it's not from God. Like, it's perfect. It's like Tupac, you know, like, it's just like the lyrics are just like, you know, like, it's just but are you saying that that Muhammad was likely using, like, is there record of people saying this, like the traditions that go back before Muhammad about the stuff he was saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's come all the way down into the Quran itself, because that's how much people around him, the naysayers, the Quran calls them, were saying, you know, you're not bringing anything new to the table, mate. These are just tales and fables and poems that we've heard. And then if you look at the Islamic record, the amount of poets that Muhammad killed in his time is astonishing, and poets that he once revered and he was clearly he heard of. And, you know, like I said, that style, I forgot the exact parameter of what that kind of poetic style is, but yeah, if you listen to, there was a pre-Islamic poem, and I think Abdullah Samir played it side by side with the Quran. And David, I kid you not, if I close my eyes, I would not be able to tell the difference. I got just the same amount of goosebumps from that poem, which was talking about something completely different, right? In that Quranic style, would give you the shivers. Again, if you have that bias or that inclination, in the same way that the Quran would do. So again, it's that language differential they take advantage of, saying, you know, you have to understand classical Arabic, then you'd understand the marvel of it. It was very much around, and again, that's a very revered style of Bedouin poetry, but the Quran essentially jacked that style.
Whoa, that makes so much sense. That makes so much sense. So, damn. Okay. Well, so I got 5 verses I'd love to go through. And I have to shout out ChatGPT, because I said, write out some controversial Quranic verses, some controversial Bible verses, and then pair them under the same categories. And then I was like, and it did it all. I was like, great, this is perfect. So I've got my Bible that I read through ministry college, and I was hoping that you could read the Quranic verses, and then I'll read the Bible verses under the same broad structure. So we can kind of really nail home what Daniel said, which is, if you got a problem with Islam, you have to have a problem with the Bible for these same things. So could you do Quran 434?
Sure. Let me just pull it up. Sorry, 1 second.
No worries. And I'll turn to Ephesians 5:22. It does feel weird sometimes to be reading like the Bible like this on the. It feels like I'm back at like a small group or like some sort of like church service.
Well, it's always interesting for me to be able to read it in Arabic with people. I've just spent half my life reading it in Arabic, so this is, and I never to spend enough time in the UK to actually be that familiar with the Bible. So except for like, you know, like Christmas carols and like the Christian hymns, that's like the extent of my knowledge.
Okay.
So yeah, let me know. Do you want me to start?
Yeah, you can start. Yeah.
Okay, sure. So this is Surah An-Nisa, Quran 434, and it reads, "Men are caretakers of women, since Allah has made some of them excel over others, and because of the wealth they have spent. So the righteous women are obedient and guard the property and honor of their husband in their absence with the protection given by Allah. As for women who you fear rebellion, convince them and leave them apart in beds and beat them. Then, if they obey you, do not seek away against them. Surely Allah is the highest, the greatest. Over to
Cool.
you.
So that's definitely spicier than the verse I have. I will amend the verse I have though to say something else. That so Ephesians 5:22, wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord, for a husband is the head of the wife, as Christ is the head of the church, his body, of which he is the savior. Now, as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit to their husbands in everything. So it does go on in this verse to say, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. So it does go on to say, like, it's a bit nicer than beat them if they disobey.
Sprinkles a little bit of love, yeah.
But it's the same dynamic where the man is put at the head, he's the authority, and the woman is put in the role of submission, the role of the lower, the lesser, the not as important, and so you got this gender inequality here, and then in the Quran it comes down to domestic abuse, which I have to point out. We had Masood on this channel before. He'll never come on the show again. We were talking about his Islamic values and his belief, and then he just dropped that. Yeah, I think Quran 434 is like good, and that if the world implemented this, we would have less domestic abuse. And I was like, I don't know how you solve domestic abuse with domestic abuse. Like, and then the whole conversation, people can go listen to it. It's a shitstorm, but the whole conversation turned to that, and that's just shows you how ingrained this stuff is. It's like it's like fighting fire with fire. It's like it's literally trying to put out a fire with fire. So it's wild.
Yeah, exactly. And like the answer to violence is never more violence, right? You need to like tackle the root of the problem. But I admire your patience in that conversation. I did listen to as much as I could.
Yeah, I know it's so but what I will say is and I'm going into this when I'm telling a bit of my story on Myth Vision podcast, but it gets worse when it comes to women and men in the Bible in the New Testament. Luckily, I think this is a non-Pauline epistle, so it means it's not a genuine Pauline epistle, but I think, have to fact check me, but in 1 Timothy it says that women are not to speak or have authority over a man in church, and they're not to speak in church. And a lot of churches still do this. They won't let women be pastors and things like that. And I remember talking to some people when I was deconstructing, and I said, hey, like, why is this? Like, and they said, well, that was just for a time. That's not for now. Which is really interesting because they will say homosexuality and LGBT, like those instructions are still valid, but but then when you read further in the verse, it says these are the reasons. For the woman was deceived first, Eve was deceived first, Eve first ate the fruit, and that's still valid today. So I don't know how they get around that unless you reject that. So there is a lot of misogyny in the Bible as well.
And David, does that extend to women having to menstruate their entire lives until menopause, and also bearing the pain of childbirth because all the way directly back to Eve?
Yeah, because Eve ate the fruit. And I used to this is horrible. I used to make that joke. Amy would have her time of the month and she'd be in a lot of pain, I'd be like, well, you shouldn't have eaten the fruit. And she would get so, she's like, you don't even believe that. And I would just laugh. But I would it was a joke, and she knew it was a joke.
She should have said, shouldn't have been a weak enough man to follow the command.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so that was 1 out of 5. So next one, punishment for blasphemy. So can you turn to Quran 5:33? And I'll turn to the Old Testament where the fun stuff is, Leviticus 24:16. yeah, I was very lucky that I survived the early years of our marriage.
Oh, you chose a very brutal surah here, David. Oh,
I didn't.
You
The
did.
ChatGPT did. And do you know what? Do you know what's so frustrating? And this is because there's a lot of political correctness around, and for the most part, I love political correctness. I'm not someone who just thinks that everyone should be running around being assholes to everyone. But it's so frustrating because you ask it a verse about the Bible, and it gives you just like this verse about the Bible, like it gives you this, but you ask about the Quran and it gives you this huge preamble, like not all scholars think this, and it's like, and you can see because it's trained off like the language of what people have been talking on the internet about the Quran, and people defend it and things like that, and try not to be ever since 9/11 the hatred towards Muslims as a people, it's been horrible. So you can see that it's trying to like buffer that a little bit, and I'm like, I don't need the preamble, like I'm not an idiot, just like tell me these verses. And I actually said I don't need the preamble, and it's like, sorry, here are the verses.
Well,
like, cool.
David, like my first interaction with ChatGPT, just to test it out, and my first question was, does the Quran have a lower age limit for marriage? And it responded saying, yes, in this blah, blah, blah verse, there is a lower age limit set to, women who menstruate or something. And I said, show me that verse, please. And it showed me the verse. And I said, where in this verse does it say menstruation or when they've reached menstruation, as you said? And then it literally was like, sorry, I'm just like learning software.
Yeah.
I was like, why are you lying to me? You straight up just lied. But yeah, ChatGPT is a bit woke at the moment for when it comes to Islam. Google is still a better friend to me than ChatGPT for Islam.
Yeah. Wow. Damn. Okay. All right. Read out your verse on punishment for blasphemy.
Okay, so this is Surah Al-Ma'idah, and it's punishment for fitna. So that can mean pretty much any kind of mischief or corruption in the land. So it reads, those who fight against Allah and His Messenger and run about trying to spread disorder on the earth, their punishment is no other than they shall be killed or be crucified, or their hands and legs be cut off from different sides, or they be kept away from the land they live in. That is a humiliation for them in this world, and for them there is a great punishment in the hereafter. Mic drop.
Again, I think the Quran takes a cake on the brutality of that. Jesus.
Yeah, David, bring it. You can't match the. Okay, if you're going to the ultimate, maybe. Okay, right. I should get too cocky.
Okay. This is very to the point. Like I feel like the Quran really like is good with the details. This just has instructions. So if anyone curses his God, he will be held responsible. Anyone who blasphemes the name of the Lord must be put to death. This is Leviticus 24:16. Anyone who blasphemes the name of the Lord must be put to death. The entire assembly must stone him, whether an alien or native born. When he blasphemes the name, he must be put to death. You're like, okay.
There's a lot of death.
It's just like, okay, like it's a lot. Like, yeah. I mean, it's
slightly lacking the sadistic humiliation aspect of that the Quran throws in a
yeah.
little.
Yeah. But think about stoning someone to death. Think about like what it takes to literally just be everyone throwing rocks at them until they're beaten to death. Like it's kind of horrible. You would suspect, and this isn't. So what I really like to do is reposition the framework. So I'm not roasting God here, but I kind of am. I'm roasting the idea of like people's idea of God, because if you believe that the creator of the universe created everything, he's all powerful, all knowing and stuff, and he gets so offended at something like this, you're teasing God, not me. I'm not teasing God. I'm saying stop teasing God. It's not okay to say this about the creator of the universe. If there is a creator of the universe, he isn't that childish. He isn't that misogynistic. He isn't that like you're being ridiculous. So yeah, it's just to me, these things just show the sanity of some of these scriptures.
Yeah, and also just the point that a lot of the, like in Islam, when it comes to some of the punishments, they have actually gotten some of those from the Old Testament as well. So that is where you do see like a little bit of a continuation when it comes to like stoning and things like that. Muhammad had interactions where he saw Jewish practices being carried out, and he would ask, "What does the Torah say on this?" Or he'd get involved in a situation where the punishment according to the Torah would be carried out. So then you see kind of him trying to differentiate himself from Jewish practices, but the literature has examples going both ways. But stoning, most people say, is one of them that was a continuation from the Old Testament.
Oh, interesting. This is why it's important to have you on, because you have the context to put all the Islamic stuff into like correct context. Okay. So the next one, Quran 4:3. Forced marriage.
1, 4, 3. Okay, so it's from Surah An-Nisa again, which is Surah of women. How much of this do you? Okay, I'll read it to you. Okay, hold on. Let me just get the better translation. Okay, so 4:3 reads, "If you fear that you will not deal fairly with orphan girls, you may marry whichever other women seem good to you, 2, 3, or 4. If you fear that you cannot be equitable to them, then marry only one, or your slaves. That is more likely to make you avoid bias or abstain from injustice, or that is more suitable for you." The translations differ, but that's the gist.
So do you know, is that did ChatGPT choose a good verse for that, or do you think there are better verses for forced marriage?
I mean, I think that's a good one for showing like the sex slavery aspect as well, because it's like more about what your right hand possess, and also, yeah, I mean, it's basically the right to polygamy, but there's an instance where there's a number of marriages that Muhammad has done, but a couple of them end up in the Quran, with varying contexts. But there's I think 2 more that ChatGPT could have gone a little bit harder on to show you Muhammad's marriage. Namely, one of them where he's like rebuking his current wives and saying, "Why do you stop me from doing what Allah has allowed me to do?" Essentially, which was basically to have a sexual relationship with one of the slave girls that the wives weren't happy with, and then him getting his marriage arranged to his adopted son's wife, who was also his cousin. But again, in that you don't see an element of consent from her side. It's more like it comes down as an order from God that he should marry her. So that's kind of hints at forced marriage as well, and absolutely no consent. And then also marital rape, the enter your wives or your tilth, enter them how you please. That has elements of forced marriage, marital rape, or the kind of harmful practices coming together.
You have this thing too, where like every cult leader is like, God wants me to have sex with your wife. Like at some stage, every cult leader wants to have sex with every member's wife, and it's that feels similar in this situation, where he's like, God said that we have to sleep with you, sleep with slave girl. So okay, so I think the Bible's got you on this one. So Deuteronomy 22, 28 to 29. If a man happens to meet a virgin who is not pledged to be married and rapes her, and they are discovered, he shall pay the girl's father 50 shekels of silver. He must marry the girl, for he has violated her. He can never divorce her as long as he lives. A man is not to marry his father's wife. He must not dishonor his father's head. But sorry, that's it's moved on now. But yeah, so brutal. So if a man meets a virgin who is not pledged, he must to be married, and rapes her, and they are discovered. So first of all, if they are discovered, he shall pay the girl's father 50 shekels of silver. So it puts a price on that. And he must marry the girl, for he has violated her. Now, I don't know what kind of rapist, rape victim doesn't want to. This is this stream is going to be totally demonetized, but I don't know what kind of rape victim doesn't want to marry her rapist.
Yeah.
And then he can never divorce her as long as he lives. There's absolutely no concern for the woman's like agency in this situation.
I think you've definitely, the Bible definitely takes the biscuit on that one. Yeah, having to marry your rapist and then paying the father because you're essentially not a human being in your own right, but you've actually offended or insulted the father, right? You've committed a crime against the father, not even that girl herself. So
yeah, it's like property rights.
Yeah, essentially, exactly.
Okay, 2 more. So violence and war. So Quran 9:29, and
that's a strong one.
Is it? Oh god, I got so many like scribbles in here, like from my youth ministry days. Like I don't know if you can see that, but there's like preach and like circles and all this stuff.
Is that when you were actually a youth pastor?
Yeah. It's like slowly falling apart, but yeah, it's
Oh my
and
God,
like look at this. Ready?
Trippy to see those notes now.
Check this out.
Oh my God.
Oh my gosh. So we got come on, here we go.
Discipleship, Jesus, each other, world. The level of effectiveness is determined by your level of surrender. David, what?
I got God didn't take my sins. God didn't take my sins. I gave it to him. Here we go. Here's like a little thing I used to draw everywhere. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Unhappy plus Jesus equals happy to the power of eternity.
Oh my God. The equation of life. That was your answer to Einstein, David.
Yeah. You can see I've always been an intellectual.
Yes, I can't believe you weren't up for a Nobel Peace Prize for that equation. Oh, you've got to get a bumper sticker or a tattoo of that just for the joke.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Do you want me to read?
Yeah, you jump in. Yeah.
Okay, sure. This is Surah At-Tawbah 9:29, and it reads, fight against. Sorry, this one is a better translation. Fight against such of those who have been given the scripture and believe not in Allah nor in the last day, and forbid not that which Allah has forbidden by his messenger, and follow not the religion of truth until they pay the tribute readily and are utterly subdued. Other words are belittled and humiliated as well.
Yeah, right. That doesn't seem. I was expecting it to be worse than that.
Well, essentially, this is a fight the non-believers, especially targeting the Jews and the Christians, because you guys were given the scriptures. When I say you guys, I meant you. You guys were given the scriptures, and you still do not believe in the conclusiveness and the finality of Muhammad as the seed of the prophets.
It's interesting because one of the things that the Bible has is that a lot of the stories, like in Exodus and Joshua and stuff, are not true. They're not accurate to history. So I don't know. So I guess that's a win. I guess that's a win for the Bible. Like the Bible's falsehood there, like in that there was no Exodus from Egypt, at least as far as the archaeology and everything else can tell. So this probably didn't happen, but it says Joshua 6:21. Okay. I'll go from verse 20. When the trumpet sounded, the people shouted, and at the sound of the trumpet, when the people gave a loud shout, the walls collapsed. So this is the story of they walked around Jericho for a few days and then blowed trumpets and the walls came down. So every man charged straight in and they took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed with the sword every living thing in it, men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. So I don't know what the sheep did, or the
Honestly.
donkeys did, or the young children, or the women, but yeah. I get that there's not much to say about that. It's just
I mean,
horrible.
it's just brutal, and
Yeah.
again, you don't stop at humanity. But again, like David, see, the thing is with again, I guess we come from different angles and like what the book is saying and like the context and whether there's any evidence behind it or not. But for example, even in the last passage about marrying a rapist, it's kind of like if people are still the mentality and the psyche, and if that's institutionalized in a way where, let's say back then, the easiest way for you to marry the person of your choice was effectively to rape them, because that sets in motion you being able to marry them. In the same way, Islam, when we're reading these passages from the Quran, we can't just assume like, oh, this bit is just a story from here or whatever, because the actual like deduction of what Islam is and how it manifests comes off the pages of these verses, right? That's why when I just read Surah At-Tawbah, David could read that and think, okay, that's not so bad. It's kind of cussing out the Jews and Christians for not thinking it, and the fighting is just pertaining to a certain historical context. But the Taliban or Boko Haram are using that verse today to implement their means to an end. They think that verse is as timeless today as it was when it was first uttered, by Gabriel to Muhammad. So yeah, it's just kind of like the institutions that they've codified through these kind of things that we're reading. But yeah, the one that you said is just harsh.
Yeah, and I fully agree. And when I say that like great that it didn't actually happen is I mean, of course there's a lot of bloodshed in history, but that doesn't, like, that's not a accepted opinion. Like within Christianity, like within the Christianity, the church that I was part of, they thought Noah's Ark was real. Like they thought it was all like a worldwide flood for a year. Koalas walked all the way from Australia. So like they still consider it real, and that's the issue. Is like, no, a lot of these people consider these things to be from God, divine, inspired, and we will get into this a little bit, but I'm interviewing Dr. Josh for a kind of a Patreon video and a documentary, and I said to him, I said, what are some questions I can ask? And he said, it'd be really good to talk about the consequences of him writing his book. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, he's written a book on slavery. And he said, well, the problem is there is like overwhelming, like it is like everyone in academia knows that the Bible has slavery in it, sex slavery, really horrible chattel slavery, horrible slavery, like just as bad, if not worse than the slave trade. It's there, it's all there. And he said that once he convinces people that it actually is there, because a lot of people will trust what apologists are saying who try to water it all down. Once they realize that it actually is there, they are then now, some of them are now going, okay, well, if the word of God says it's there, then therefore it's justified. And they're now arguing for like theocracies where we bring back things like slavery and things like, well, okay, well, if it's in the word of God, we must be following the word of God. So, and it's just like, he's like actually being concerned about the harm that he may have done by pointing out that the Bible actually endorses slavery. Because people are going, okay, well, I can't reject the word of God, like, so therefore I have to follow it. So yeah,
that's crazy. Wild. I did not know there were any pockets of society that would kind of lean that way just by hearing that as a point of argument. Wow, that is very worrying indeed.
Yeah, it is. And the last one, Quran 2:191 and Leviticus 20.
Did you say 2:191, David?
Yeah, 2:191.
Okay, Baqarah. The Surah of the Cow, one of the longest surahs in the Quran, the longest in the Quran. Oh wow. Okay, we're gonna go toe to toe with this one.
Mine's very seems very chill, I think. All right. I keep going to your verse, but in the Bible.
Okay, while you
Alright.
find it, I'll read
Yeah.
Baqarah. This is 2191, and it reads, "Kill them wherever you encounter them, and drive them out from where they drove you out. For persecution is more serious than killing. Do not fight them at the sacred mosque unless they fight you there. If they do fight you, kill them. That is what such disbelievers deserve."
Can you give us some context to that? That sounds quite brutal.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of the, again, a lot of the more progressive, and I'd say that, there's a lot of Muslims out there who don't do Daniel Kikachu kind of apologetics, right? So they would say, look, if you contextualize this and we go into the tafsir, it is literally talking about, when Muhammad was being heavily persecuted, he was driven out of Mecca. And so this is more in a defensive context as opposed to an offensive context. And again, it's only relevant to what was happening between Muhammad, as the small following of Muslims he had, and the way that he was treated and had to do the hijrah, so like the migration out of Mecca to Medina. And he was also persecuted when he went to Taif as well. So there's a few instances in the Quran which talks about the harm that was done to him by the disbelievers. So to be fair to the Quran, you can actually contextualize it, because as soon as you look at the reason for the revelation, it's called Asbabul Nuzul in Arabic. That's basically giving you the context of the story and why essentially God revealed that. But the reason that it's intellectually dishonest to just take that approach is because the Quran also says this is your eternal guidance. You need to look no further than this and the Sunnah of the Prophet, so which is that is your eternal, timeless, perfect example. And then the Quran also, just to add a cherry on top, says this book has divine guidance. In it, some parts are to be taken literally, and others are analogous. I hate that. Others are analogous. So it doesn't tell you which is which and how to separate them. It just leaves that to the reader. And it's the reader's prerogative to try and understand which part of the Quran is completely an allegory, what's a metaphor, what's to be taken literally. And again, you see how much the Quran needs the other literature of Islam to hold itself up, because you can't find the 5 prayers in the Quran. You can't even find the 5 full pillars in Islam, or how to go about fulfilling them. So that's a little caveat. So even if you take the apologetic approach of, context, which is the most favorite things that Muslim apologists say, well, then you have to also agree or concede that the Quran is not timeless and not an eternal example, and it is very up to the reader. You can get Winnie the Pooh out of it, and you can get Al Qaeda out of it if you wanted to.
Yeah, and that's, I guess that's the point, and that's why think Neil deGrasse Tyson, that most Muslims are just as hypocritical as most Christians and don't take their literature as seriously as it demands, because otherwise, we'd have. Well, like you said, though, you can get Winnie the Pooh out of it. So I guess there are some parts of it that people can just emphasize more than others. But that is brutal, and you explained it so well. And this is one thing that I always like to drive home is like, if you were God, picture you were God, and you had an important message for civilization. It was so important; it was beyond anything else, because it relates to their eternity. How would you get that message across? Like, you're all powerful. Would you write it down in a book to be, would you give words to a prophet that needed to be written down by someone else and then, or interpret it? That's right? Like, you interpreted, someone else wrote down the words of what the prophet spoke. Is that right?
Yeah, he had scribes.
Yeah. And then is that, and then it continued to be misused and mistranslated throughout the ages? Or if I was God, I would just make it so that when every person's born, they have the entire Quranic values or the entire Bible memorized in part of their brain, like the same way I know that food is like hot plate is hot and burns skin and don't like that, I should be able to have that embedded on me, like that I know all of the Quran, or I know all of the Bible, or I know. That's how I would do it if I had an important message. Or I would just come down and say, hey, I'm God, like you have a choice to accept me or reject me, and if you reject me, you're going to hell. I mean, that would at least make sense. None of this makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. That's also really funny as well, because Christianity, you can find Jesus, and you can get salvation that way. But Islam goes like Hitchens always says, it makes such grand claims for itself, right? So it says everybody is naturally, your innate being is naturally your natural disposition is to be a Muslim. So yeah, David, you were born Muslim and didn't even know it.
Wow. Okay. Oh, good. So I'm going. So cool. So I'm going to paradise or whatever. Cool.
No, because
no.
you didn't. Now you've heard about the message and you're still not.
So you shouldn't tell anyone about the message.
Exactly. Keep your mouth shut.
It's actually, I do want to touch on that quickly before I read my verse. Is like the idea that children go to heaven is like, a lot of people accept that, but the problem is like, well, the logical extension of that is if a child dies before the age of accountability, and they go to heaven, like guaranteed, then they've got 100% chance of going to heaven. But if you let them get past the age of accountability, it doesn't matter what any number that it doesn't matter what the chances are of them going to heaven. If they remain faithful the rest of the days of their life, it's still less than 100% chance. And as a result, you're still adding to the chance of them going to hell. And there's a woman who took this very seriously and drowned her 4 kids in the bathtub because she was so scared. She was like, I'm willing to sacrifice my salvation and murder them, and like so that I know that they'll be in heaven, because she couldn't deal with the idea that it would be polluted by the world. Now, she was I think she was clinically insane, but it was logically consistent. Like, and that's the problem, I think, with this Christian doctrine. Anyway, the verse. Leviticus 20 verse 10. If a man commits adultery with another man's wife, and the wife with the wife of his neighbor, both the adulterer and the adulteress must be put to death. Cool. So yeah, adultery, death.
Yeah. Same thing over here. It's just I don't know why ChatGPT equated the Quranic killing the non-believers to adultery, but yeah, probably had.
Well, I think it's the being put to death thing. It's like this is under the category capital punishment. So there are capital punishments for both, I guess, not being a Muslim, and for disbelief, yes, and for committing adultery.
And adultery, yeah. That was also like such an extension of "Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife," wasn't it? And then the punishment is
there's also
there's
also like, I've got this little like note here, and I'm just like, I wonder what that said. And it said, if a man lies with a man as one lies with a woman, both have done what is detestable. They must be put to death. Their blood will be on their own heads.
Yeah. And then we have the whole Lot story to cement that into our brains. Yeah.
This is wild, right? If a man marries both a woman and her mother, it is wicked. Both he and they must be burned in the fire, so that no wickedness will be among you.
Was that a common practice, do you reckon?
If a man has sexual relations with an animal, he must be put to death, and you must kill the animal. What did the animal do?
Oh, yeah. We have that exact prescription in Islam as well for bestiality. The animal must die.
Oh, it's so bizarre.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so bizarre. So again, if you consider that all these, like, if you just go, yep, the Bible and the Quran say these things, therefore they're moral, then nothing we say will be of concern to you. But if you have, intuitions that go, maybe slavery isn't okay, maybe like killing unbelievers isn't okay, maybe like stoning to death for things like, what we've mentioned isn't okay, then maybe this is something to look at, and like look at your holy scriptures and dig into them a little more. And there's so much other problems in the Quran. And one of the things that you talk about a lot is veiling. You had a debate with someone about veiling. Could you touch a little bit about some of the like real world implications of that at the moment?
Yeah, sure. And David, just on your last point as well, what we essentially like the major ethical dilemma or issues that we're highlighting here as well is the whole concept of a disproportionate punishment, right? For, I mean, something like adultery or whatever. Again, we've come to such a point now where it's morally wrong, but we don't treat it as a crime that requires that level of punishment. And we understand now how deterrents work or don't work, and how effective is capital punishment and things like that. But again, it's the disproportionate kind of punishments, and also holistically, like, disbelievers not believing in this one God in this one lifetime will be punished eternally. So there's also that aspect to it as well, which we see as a common theme in both. So ethically, you have those questions to argue as well. That why is God giving people, if legal jurists understand proportionality, why does this supreme being not? How is that fair? But yeah, on your point about veiling, so again, the way that it manifests according to the mainstream interpretation of veiling, how it's mandated in the Quran, if you look at most Islamic countries around the world, there's different styles of how you veil, but you can see pretty much everything from the entire like black kind of draped abaya, and then it can have like the jilbab style where everything is covered and just the eyes are left uncovered. In Saudi as well, you see them wearing gloves, and in other Gulf countries. In Afghanistan, there's kind of like the whole chadar thing, which is like an entire face covering, and that's kind of, it's more blue. They don't follow the black Arabic like garb that they have. So it manifests differently. But as you can see with every country where Islam is the kind of state authority, the way they implement veiling is exactly what kind of mainstream Islam tells you, that guard your honor, protect your chastity, hide your beauty. It's kind of like that Christian aspect of, how even in the Victorian times, David, it was like be seen and not heard. Islam is don't be seen and don't be heard. So you can tell obviously what's been happening in countries like Afghanistan since the Taliban have taken over. They've gone and like beheaded all literal mannequins that were in shops, even just like selling women's clothes, because that's how much they want to erase women from society. They changed the name of the Ministry of Women to the Ministry of Vice and Virtue. They put down all of the posters that were around like advertising spas and salons. You just have like a beauty model or like an actress there with like her make. They could not have a single like any facet of a woman being shown publicly in society. They've done everything in their power to remove it. They force women to stay home, stay covered up. So essentially, you are now only allowed to go and get like essentials, or you literally like from your house to the grocery store, and even then you need the permission of like a male in your family. And if you catch the Taliban on a bad day, you have no idea what they're going to do to you. And similarly in Iran, where you see like these insane like countrywide protests erupting on the back of Mahsa Amini's tragic death. She was a 22-year-old Kurdish woman. She went to Tehran to, go and visit the city, a city within her own country. For the first time, she had like left and wanted to be a tourist. So she was showing two strands, like literally her first two strands of hair were just kind of, being shown through the veil that she had on, which again, by the way, in most countries, like I grew up in Saudi Arabia and Dubai, even Emirati and Saudi women sometimes, it's quite loose on your head, and you don't anticipate that the religious police or anyone, only if it's like, very inappropriate according to their standards, do they kind of rebuke you. But in Mahsa Amini's case, they took it way too far, and they essentially really messed with evidence and CCTV footage, and essentially beat this woman to a pulp, to the point where she was just able to be transferred to a hospital, but she died there later on from her injuries. And she set this like wave in motion of, it was as iconic as like the man who didn't give the Nazi salute, or like, remember that Buddhist monk burning himself alive. Like those kind of iconic like the repercussions that it had. So it was women, and then she came from like the Kurdish area as well. So they've got their own kind of separatist fight with Iran as well, and the state of Iran. So it had even more like fervor and kind of emotion driven behind it. And then when people were protesting, the way that the state reacted to all of these women who were like, they had White Wednesday protests and things like that, which is when they would actually take off their hijabs and wave it on a stick. So there's all this rhetoric about down with the mullahs. But instead of it being just like we want like a regime change, this is actually now them saying like, this is the Islamic state. This is an Islamic state in power. These are these mandatory rulings about you taking over our agency, dictating to us what we should do. You can't dance in the streets. We can't sing. You're getting killed. You're getting like dishonor killed for TikTok videos and things like that. They are taking girls as young as 14 who were protesting, and they drag them into a station. The next thing you hear is they're raped, battered, bruised. And this is just what we can get from what we're hearing out of Iran. You don't see the media speak about it very much. I'm sure it's not kind of I haven't seen the media cover it in a good couple of weeks anyway. But yeah, there's a huge ongoing kind of tussle in Iran at the moment.
According to a quick Google search, so from VAO News, Iran security forces have killed at least 537 people in a crackdown protest that erupted in September.
And taking the amount that they've imprisoned and that have like disappeared as well is over the 5,000 mark last time I checked, and that was a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, 522.
Yeah,
have died in Iran protest. Yeah.
And the thing is, here in Iran, what we're seeing now, it's become more than just like so it is like a woman's-led revolution, I would say. But more than that, it's like because of the power of social media, they're not as easily able to silence these voices anymore, because like the younger generation are very astute when it comes to using social media. And it's like across all like segments of society, they are mobilizing to show their disenfranchisement with the state. So it's not just like it's confined to just women. It's like elderly, like kids, teenagers, young professionals, everyone are coming together, and that's including male allies. So yeah, I would definitely say if there's anything you could do to support the movement that is taking hold in Iran, then please do. There have been protests worldwide, some in Australia. Yeah.
I think that I'm going to have to focus some more attention on this because this is tragic. I might have to have some others on the podcast and talk about this. There's a Wikipedia page here, deaths during the Masa Amini protests, and then it just lists every single person. Gunshot wound, was fatally wounded, gunshot wound, headshot, and like goes right down. Killed by two shots in the neck, gunshot wound, and this list goes right down to 417. So I guess these are the ones that have been verified because it's got names. Yeah, that's absolutely brutal. It's weird to me that you have this you have people that want to live a certain way, and the government is like, nope, like. You don't, like, we're going to inflict religious laws on you, but like it's like, doesn't that like defeat the entire purpose of religion? Like, isn't religion supposed to be like a personal commitment rather than like something that's forced upon, or is it the perspective that like, I don't know, is it their perspective that like you're corrupting by unveiling, you're corrupting everyone else around?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is with Islam is when Islam is in like power in terms of like on a state level, the difference I have with, and this is why I'm not really for Islam reforming per se, is because it's not just something you can put aside as like something personal. This is between you and your God, or whether you're praying 5 times a day at home and how you choose to express yourself as a Muslim woman. You have every single right to do that in a liberal, progressive country, sure. And nobody, there is like a lot of Muslims also hide behind that and say, you have no right to tell somebody else whether they're Muslim or not, or how Muslim they are. But when it comes to Islam being in power, Islam is a lot more than just a religion anyway, because of the totalitarian aspect. It's a legal system, it's a political system, it's a banking system, it's a personal hygiene system, it's a relationship harmony, whatever keeping system, which is absolutely not. But this is how it presents itself in every aspect of your life. It will be governed by Islam. So you can only imagine when that's implemented on a state level. If the book itself is saying to you, forsake them in their beds and then beat them, the heads of power, essentially all men, because women aren't even allowed in those positions of power in an Islamic state de facto, are going to take the most misogynistic and kind of literal interpretations of that, especially when it's to their benefit. So if you can control women and you can determine their movements and you can keep them locked up and you're not worried about their sexual promiscuity or them getting a bit too educated to understand what abuse is, to be financially independent, then technically what they've got according to Islam is a perfect system to keep Islam expanding. So your women are going to stay home, they're going to raise children, they're going to just keep having more children. Your sons are going to be given the preference, right? So if you look at what's happened in Iran, if you look at Afghanistan, every single position of power is held by a man. So the first thing they do, even when the Taliban took power, was women judges, David, that had worked so hard to push legislation towards actually locking up the perpetrators of abuse that was not initially recognized, with the previous Taliban government. Things were starting to change. And the first thing when the Taliban came to power was find all of those women judges, all of those women lawyers, all of those women who were kind of embedded in actual fundamental society, and blackmailed them, killed them, threatened them, threatened their families, and just essentially took women out of the picture. There's a really famous video where I think an American journalist or somebody is asking a Taliban, one of the guys in government, what he thinks about women being educated or in a position of government. And he thought it was a joke. Like he literally laughed jovially thinking, oh, she's made a really funny joke. Like women in power, like in government, like he could not dispute it.
It's like literally a joke on Borat. Like when Borat would go and interview, and someone would say like, oh, "I'm waiting for the," he'd be like, "I'm waiting for the reporter," and then it'll be like a lady reporter, and he'd be like, "Oh, you're a reporter? No way! We don't allow that in Kazakhstan." It's literally a joke, and it's like a reality. That's crazy. Oh,
madness. Oh, Derek's in the chat as well.
Derek is in the chat. Hey, Derek, it's awesome to see you. And it's so good to see you. And it's yeah, Derek's an absolute legend.
Derek is a legend.
Oh, it's so good.
Yes.
So there's actually one thing I did want to touch on before we like kind of wrap up, and that is like you. So how can I say this? So I've had trans folks on the show, and one thing that I noticed is they always have to justify their existence all the fucking time. Like if they're like, they have to like get into conversations with people about what gender is, what sex is, and they have to like consistently justify their existence. So that's like one thing that I really picked up. The one thing that I really picked up with your story is how offensive it is to so many Muslims. And you can see that because the short that I produced for you has 13,000 views. And the comments in this so I try to be pretty cordial on deep drinks. But I kind of like cracked the shits a little bit, and I just started like roasting everyone in the comments because it was just so disgusting. So I want to just quickly show the clip. It goes for a minute. It's your story. You said this, you told this last time on Deep Drinks, but then I want to go through some of the comments and kind of talk about what people said. Okay,
living in the UAE, I was married Islamically, so by default, women are not given the right to divorce in Islam. Very quickly, the marriage fell apart. There was like a lot of abuse there. When this police officer in the UAE called me up and said, "We've got this order for Taha Zawjiyya on you," and I was like, "Sorry, I have no idea what you're on about, mate." He basically said, like, you need to go back to your husband's house and return there, and you cannot leave without his permission. If you don't go back by this time and date, we will arrest you and forcibly take you back. They came to my house as well. They tried to catch me there and tried to take me again in the middle of the night. And when it got very, very serious, I had to call the emergency number for British expats in Dubai, because I was like, these people aren't ensuring my safety. To go to like Islamic marriage counseling before you can get a divorce, and he would say things like, she's possessed with like there's like a jinn inside me. A jinn is like an Islamic demon. The counselor would say, like, how many times a day do you pray?
Were they court appointed marriage counselors that you had to go through?
Official ones, yes. I was living.
So powerful story.
So sick as well, David.
Thank you. That's what I do for a job now. So like
I can see why.
So the comments here, and oh boy, why are you cutting the video up? This interview was embarrassing to watch with a blatant misrepresentation. As a Muslim, I'm shocked this girl is a good actress. The biggest lie I've heard, that the UAE blah 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 has nothing to do with Islam. If you genuinely feel sympathy for this woman, research her first statement. Such a sad story. Think of the millions. Well, okay, that's a good one. This is misleading. Women in Islam do have the right to divorce. W for that man. See, she is such a liar, and the Oscar goes to. She's wrong on so many levels. This is a nice comment from you. This is fire, David. But like, this is like, you have to consider, like, this is what, like, I was getting pissed off because it was like ruining my good time every time I would jump on YouTube. But this isn't even me. It's like, it's you. It's you're a friend, and it's like it was really bothering me. As you can see me just like in the comments here, just yeah. I feel bad for the guy wasting his time with her mindset. Like, this is if she's not in Bollywood, she was soon with the caliber of acting.
Thank you very much.
So I mean, it's just ridiculous. But the thing that everyone seemed to harp on about is they'll say that you're lying. And I'm like, I don't know how. And one of the things I noticed is when I type in Nuriyah Khan on YouTube, the first auto suggestion is exposed. People are desperate.
No, sorry, go ahead.
People are desperate to see you debunked, or Nuriyah Khan debunked, exposed. And I'm like, this is her personal story. Like, what part of it? What part do you disagree with? And then people, and I'll argue with a few people and say, well, women do have the right to divorce in Islam. And I was like, okay, like maybe on like some like fantasy land you have, but I looked into the laws and I was like, okay, it says here specifically that they must go before a court, but then, and this is what you explained to me, but they trust the man's opinion, they trust the man over the woman. So unless you're coming in with like black eyes and like bloody nose and like you know, obviously being mistreated, they'll trust the man's because we're not to be trusted. And that's what happened with you, right? So like, you wanted to get divorced, you went to the courts, you did everything you could, and you couldn't get a divorce because your husband at the time just lied. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought this up, because this is a great point to clarify as well. But also, David, side note, I think if you find any of the kind of major ex-Muslim activists on YouTube, type in their name, the first thing will come up is exposed. They are out to get or like debunked or like destroyed. Those are the famous words. Exposed, debunked,
destroyed.
Yeah. And the thumbnails are out of this world. Oh my gosh, there's like fire, there's like laughy emojis, like it's all happening. But yeah, no, I wanted to, I saw a lot of these comments as well. So obviously I've pinned this beautifully edited videos of yours to my Twitter, and I think it's got incredible amount of views by this point. And obviously people just continuously comment. I'm just trying to see how many people have seen it now. So 122k people have seen it on Twitter.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's
and then I was looking at the comments again because I think I was keeping up with this one as opposed to YouTube. But the one thing again, and I usually do go in and respond, but sometimes when it's just the same like line you're repeating over and over again, either you don't know your religion or you're making a mug out of me and telling me like what I experienced really did not happen. But Islamically speaking, by just the literature that we have, a woman cannot just ask for divorce in the same way that a husband can. So in Islam, a man has the unilateral right to divorce. The Quran talks about how a man can divorce his wife. There's a procedure. Then there's the concept of how you get your wife back if you've divorced her and you want her back. This is all pertaining to a man. I think there's like something like 3 conditions that you can like go and move away from your husband, or your relationship is effectively rendered like dissolved if he, and it's so old school, like they're talking about somebody going off to fight war, because it's like if you haven't heard from him in 2 years, like essentially that's considered desertion. And I think there's 1 or 2 more, but none of those give women the right to get a divorce. That's why countries like Pakistan, countries like Tunisia, countries like Egypt, but all of these countries had to essentially get an Islamic council to sit over the years and decide that, right, we need to have an option, because women are coming out from all across the Islamic world saying, how? Like, this is not possible. That's when this concept of khulla, which is essentially what you read about, where a woman can approach the court and initiate a divorce. Again, like you said, the conditions and terms that come with that are very severe. That's what I was explaining in my video to you, right? You've got to meet a certain threshold of what they consider or deem effective for you to get a divorce. So are you being abused emotionally? If they don't know what it is, it's not grounds for divorce. Are you being abused financially? They don't know what it is. Your husband's supposed to pay for your makeup and that's it. Shut up. So the khulla concept that I'm talking about, a lot of these Muslim apologists are coming into the comments and saying you can get a divorce in Islam. Yes, you can now. Now, because countries have implemented a concept called khulla. That's why now in Pakistan, when you sign the marriage contract, by default, to change the way that society operated and like the violence that was being perpetuated against women, they added that clause in. And now, even to this day, the Islamic cleric who's getting them married automatically crosses it out. So families have to check to see if the imam has not crossed it out. So like when I do videos in Urdu with Dr. Madiha, we're trying to tell Muslim women in Pakistan, know your rights on the marriage contract and make sure that that's not scribbled out. In my case, I was the first daughter to get married in my family, and we don't speak Arabic, and my parents didn't have it the foggiest that there was no concept of like no divorce in Islam. Obviously, we were taught fluffy Islam, lived in the UK, not really, didn't know the ins and outs. So they didn't ask for it to be in my marriage contract in the UAE. So if it wasn't there, it wasn't an option. Thankfully, you have khulla to fall back on now. And again, some places don't recognize khulla. So when you do hear that in Islam you're allowed to get divorced, just please bear in mind that what they're telling you is factually correct now, but it's not factually correct from the sources of Islam as we know them. If that makes sense. There was a concept and consensus. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like it's one of those things. It's one of those things where like it's typical, it's like semantic games that apologists and people who are butthurt about their religion will do. They play these like semantic games when reality is like, well, you tried to get a divorce and you couldn't, so like you didn't have the right, like you didn't have the ability to do that. Like it's just so I just wish, I've said this multiple times, but Islam has to be the most sensitive religion on earth, and that to me isn't a win. That isn't like they get so angry if anyone insults the Prophet. They get so angry if you criticize Islam. I've had people on my Discord say that they're sticking up for Andrew Tate and saying he didn't rape those women, and then when we push this person, like, well, this is what he said publicly. This is what the court docs. Well, this is what the court docs say. This is what everything's in. They'll say, well, I stick by him because he's a Muslim, and Muslims stick by each other. I'm like, that is so. I was going to use some poor choice of words there, but that is so dumb. Like that is the dumbest. Like it's again the most sensitive religion in the world. Like they can't handle, and that to me it's just like it shows the falsehood of the whole thing. If you need apologists to explain things away, the religion probably isn't accurate representation of the world. If you need apologists, or if you get so angry when someone criticizes something, yeah, I had someone in those comments say, I think they were talking, I don't know how I got onto this, but they said, you know, what do you expect my, what if my child does something bad and they just spit in my face and I'm not supposed to hit them? And I said, yes, you're not supposed to hit them. Like that's, you're correct there. Yes. Like that's, you know, I don't know how we got onto beating children, but yeah, I think we're talking about the Quran. But yeah, it's just go through that video and just see like all the stuff. It's just nuts. But again, I thank you for sharing your story. It took a lot of guts, and what you do is so important. And I look forward to kind of seeing where your journalism and your like stuff goes in the future, because it's just, again, so important. And yeah, you're always welcome on Deep Drinks for sure.
Thank you, David. Again, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you. Time flies as always, and it's always fun getting a Deep Drinks invite, because you know you can let loose as well and have like a free flowing, good, stimulating chat. I love it. And I've got a few
super chats before we go.
Yeah,
that's
for
cool.
Sure. Yeah.
We got £2 from Ultra G Fire Block. I don't know what that means, but
you just gotta say G Block.
Oh, G Block. I was meant to come up with Australian slang for you. Hey.
Oh yeah, next time.
I forgot. Yeah.
It stands for godless, by the way, David. You're not seeing anything. Don't worry.
Okay. Don't be afraid. # David at McDonald saying G Block is to theists what garlic is to a vampire. Say it loud, say it proud. G Block. Okay, cool. Get them, Nuriyah, Holy Humanist. Thank you for all the super chats. £2, £5, £2. That's awesome. D, thank you for the huge super chat. Love your notes, David. I get all my religious books used on Amazon, and other people's notes are fascinating. It'd be really cool to see some of those notes. We should do like a collaboration, and I'll do like a blog post or something. This isn't a super chat, but D, you said have Amini Navabi on. Sorry, I'm so bad at pronouncing. Yes. And yes, I'll reach out. I'm gonna do that. Because
yes, David, because you need to deep dive with him about, you know, that loophole you're talking about bypassing hell. Armin Navabi's story actually really encompasses that, where he legit tried to do that. So definitely one. I don't want to speak a story for him.
I reached out to him back when we had like 10 episodes out, I think, and he was so gracious to say, "Yep, like I'm just busy, but reach out to me in a month." And I forgot to reach out to him, or something changed. And yeah, I definitely want to, because incredible story. I've heard only parts of it, but I want to get the deeper dive. And Myth Vision podcast. Here's some love for ex-Muslims and freedom from religion. Love, Nuriyah and David.
Hey, Derek. Thank you.
So many times he'll message me and say, like something like ask a question, but it's always when he's having a bath for some reason, because he must be thinking. And so I'll voice call him, and then he'll answer. Like we become bros at this stage, and like so he'll be in the bath, and I'll be talking to him, and he's in the bath, and we're like voice calling, and it's so weird. I love Derek. He's
bath bros brainstorming session.
Yeah, I said I'll get in my bath, and we can just like have a
brainstorm away.
Yeah. And then like the other day, I was like, I heard this like I heard Ryan's voice. I was like, is Ryan in the bath with you? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, this is so weird. This feels very intimate. Like you guys are having a bath together, and I'm talking to you about stuff. I was like, and he's like, yeah, it's fine. I'm like, oh, this is fun.
Yeah, you're in deep, David.
Yeah, that's it. So guys, lastly, go check out Holy Humanist on YouTube. Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Make sure you check it out. And go subscribe. And if you go over there, maybe, I don't know, like if you chuck an emoji in the chat, like if you haven't subscribed to Nuriyah before, what should be my emoji? If you put like a whiskey glass in the comments,
yes.
Nuriyah will know it's you've come from Deep Drinks.
About Fury and whiskey aficionados.
Yeah.
Deep
And
drinks,
we have
yeah.
some awesome episodes coming from Deep Drinks. We have the Book of Slavery and Genocide. Tell me this isn't the best clickbait ever, because it's actually about his book, but it's anyway. I'm clever. I'm very clever.
You
And
are.
we have a panel on creation myths and the Hebrew Bible, which will be really cool, with Paula G, Dr. Kip, and Dr. Josh. We have Dr. Robin Welsh coming on, talking about her book about early Christianity's literature, which is really, really, really cool. And we have the illustrious Matt Dillahunty coming on, which will be super awesome. He played probably the biggest role in my deconstruction. So yeah, it's gonna be great.
That's
So-
crazy, right, David? When you get to a point where you're calling somebody onto your channel that once you've watched their videos and they were like untangling your mind, your neurons to make you think the way you do now. Mental.
It's like I always have this test. I always ask myself, like, who would I want to have lunch with for 2 hours? And it's changed from everyone from Richard Dawkins to Trey Parker, the creator of South Park, to oh god, who else has been? There's a list of there's people that, depending on where I'm at. Edmund McMillan, his video game creator. There's people I've always like, who would I want to have a 2 hour lunch with? And Matt Dillahunty was on there for a long time. So it's gonna be a dream come true to be able to sit down and chat with him over an iced tea, which is the drink he's chosen. So it'll be really good.
Brilliant. I've got my notifications on for all your videos. So yeah, guys,
awesome. Cool. Well, thank you everyone for coming out. Thank you, Nuriyah, for coming on, and we'll see everyone later.